So I have with me today, for the very first Scaling School videocast, Alex MacCaw, who's the CEO of Clearbit, which is the premier data-powered marketing suite available today that lets you drum up demand with targeting advertising, detect intent by seeing who's visiting your website, and ties together all of your marketing with the best data available. So Alex, welcome again to the very first Scaling School videocast. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome.
My pleasure.
Excellent. Right on. So Alex, can you please tell us a little bit more about Clearbit today? What does it look like as a company so we know who we're talking to? And I'd like you to please brag a bit here. Remember,
Okay.
You're not bragging about yourself, you're bragging about the company, so it's okay.
Okay. So just in terms of stats, the company's about 5 years in now. We have roughly 100 people. We are about half remote usually, although right now we're 100% remote. And we have an office based out in San Francisco. And I've been working with you for 3 years now, 3 years. And you came in when we were about 25 employees and really transformed the business.
Right on. And we're going to get to that. But before that, I want to dive back a little bit more into your history because you've got, there are a lot of things that are fascinating about you, Alex. But one of them, I think, is that you have one of the more extreme paths from school to starting a company of anyone I know. Can you please share with us that path? And please start when you were still in school in the UK.
Yeah, so, man, I was at a school in England, a boarding school. I actually left to go to boarding school when I was 8. So I was at boarding schools and I started
Which is
coding.
actually fairly normal in the UK.
It's a bit more normal, yeah. I mean, anyone who's seen Harry Potter, it's basically like that, but less magic. And so I'm in this boarding school, and I have quite a lot of spare time on my hands. I start coding, start doing consultancy at school, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I could either go
But not
out.
when you were 8. How
No,
old
this
were you?
I was about 15 at this point. So, and I started coding when I was 13 maybe. And so, but by the time I was 15, I was good enough to be dangerous. I was doing consulting. And I think no one realized on the other end of this line was like a 15-year-old. So I had that I had that advantage that no one knows that who you are on the internet really, or what age you are.
And what kind of coding work were you doing for customers?
So, man, I did some work for some disaster preparedness companies who wanted to, like, some portal where they could coordinate disaster responses. I worked for a charity.
So it was primarily website work.
Yeah, it was website work. And I did a lot of open source work as well. That's kind of how I cut my teeth. I started reading a lot of code and then doing a lot of open source myself and getting a name for myself.
I know.
And then I got to the point where I was like, well, either I could go out and get a computer science degree. I'm not really very good at math, and it doesn't sound very fun. I'm like, well, I'm already earning as much as the teachers are earning, and like, why do I need a degree? So I just dropped out when I was 17.
And what grade were you in?
I don't know. I mean, it's the different grades in England, but usually no one has ever dropped out at that age from that school. Usually you would stay another year at least. And then you would go to university. So I dropped out. It was a little controversial at the time. My parents were very supportive, which is amazing. And then I started working in London. And I worked for various consultancies in London and had a few failed startups and things, but ultimately realized I wanted to move to the States. But I had no qualifications, and companies in the States don't really care about the qualifications. They'll hire you, but the US government does. And so they make it pretty difficult to move to America. And in fact, it's one of the most difficult countries in the world to move to. And so I had to figure out how to move to the States. And there's a whole story there that I can get into. But basically,
you got your O1, is that right?
Yeah. Long story short, I wrote a couple of books for O'Reilly Publishing on JavaScript and CoffeeScript, and that was enough for me to get my visa and then move to the States to work at Twitter. So I worked there for a bit, and then Stripe. I was employee number 20 at Stripe. Built a lot of their early products. Built the Stripe checkout, and that was a lot of fun. And then after that, realized I wanted to do my own thing again. Got my green card, and then started Clearbit, and that was about 5 years ago now.
Fantastic. And that leads us right into what caused you to realize that Clearbit needed to exist? How did you discover that customer problem and realize you had the solution?
Yeah, well, it was more I needed to grow. I was running a lifestyle business actually at the time that was doing fine, but I felt like I was stagnating. One of my personal values is growth, and so without that, I'm not super happy. And I realized, and I'm in my 20s, I should really start something much bigger and try and grow, give it a shot. If not, I can always start another lifestyle business again. And so that was kind of the impetus. So I sold that lifestyle business and started Clearbit. And Clearbit v0.1 was a very different vision, a very different beast. It was what was called API Hub for a start. It's a very, very developer-centric name. And it was targeted towards engineers. I worked at Stripe, and I was just replaying the Stripe playbook, which is target engineers and technical folks. And I was like, well, I'll build the Stripe, but for data. I saw at Stripe there was really very little data that we had access to, and it was either in a bad format or just didn't exist at all. And so I wanted to go out and solve that problem, primarily around business data, who's visiting your website. It's kind of crazy that you don't know which companies are visiting your website, which companies are showing intent. You don't know who the person is behind the email. So I was like, I'm going to go out and try and solve those problems. And then originally I was going to be like, I would solve those problems for engineers. It turns out that engineers didn't really have those problems and certainly weren't willing to pay for them and to solve them. And so I transitioned the company into sales and marketing, which a focus. We really felt like sales and marketing were pulling us. I think those sales and marketing leaders really understood how we use the data, and they actually saw value in it. They wanted to use the data for lead qualification, lead scoring. They had so many people coming to their websites that they couldn't sift through all these leads manually. They needed data to do that, and so they came to us for that. And
so essentially, you started the company in exactly the way that I would not advise to do it. Which is you said, I'm going to build a product and then go sell it to people instead of talking to the customers and finding out what their actual problem was. But luckily for you, the product is good enough that you eventually did find the customers who actually needed it.
Yeah, it was a stab in the dark, and it was just a lucky stab. I, as you say, I would do a lot more customer development than we did. We were just lucky that everyone needs data. It's just the natural order. Every business has always needed more data, and so we were pulled in the right direction.
And then now Clearbit has now just become a very different beast. Before, what I call 1.0 was data collection and clean data to serve up to marketing people. And now Clearbit 2.0 is very different. So can you please tell us the founding story of that? First of all, what is the new Clearbit, and how did you realize it needed to be created? Because I think this one was a little bit more talking to the customers and seeing their actual pain points and problems and going, oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's right. I mean, so back then it was just me, I was doing everything, a one-man band. And there was very little proper custom development going on. It was, I would not, I don't know if I'd start like that, but now we have an amazing product team, and we have PMs who go out and do a lot of research. And so over the last 5 years, we have seen a lot, as you can imagine. We're in the middle of the action. Our data is used for sales and marketing. And so we've sold to thousands of companies around the world, and some of the best of the best of the best. And we get to see exactly how they do sales and marketing internally, what are their problems, and we get to see how they use our data as well. And what we noticed was that the best companies actually treated growth more like a product, and they iterated on it over time. They had technical resources, they had engineers working on it, like they really like fine-tuned it. And so those companies really saw the value in our data, and they actually didn't even want the data just sync to Salesforce. They wanted the API key because they were technical and they had engineers in that team. And then they had some amazing use cases.
Back to your original intent of who your customer would be.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, that's right. And then the use cases they came up with were great. Like we had Zendesk, which they have tons of people signing up to their form. They want to try and improve the conversion of their sign up form. So they started shortening it and using our data instead of asking people questions. They would ping us first, and if we could answer those questions, then they didn't bother having those fields in the form. So that was really interesting. We started seeing people use our Reveal de-anonymization API. So that essentially shows you who's visiting your website. But for that information to be really useful, you need to tie it up with like who your Salesforce ops are. You need to tie it into the rest of your marketing data. Again, requiring technical resources. And so what we saw time and time again were these companies that had these incredible growth teams that were using our data, but these use cases were really limited to these high growth top tier companies that could afford to have engineers on their team, on their growth team. So we were like, okay, this makes no sense. We really should be packaging up these solutions. The product development has been done for us. We know that there's a need for this. We know that it's going to be valuable. Let's package it up and sell it to the rest of our customer base. And so that's what we did. About a couple of years ago, we started doing that.
So what this reminds me of is AWS. You can go to Google and get public hosting. You can go to Microsoft to get public hosting. But Amazon says, we've got all the initial users because they were the first to do it. Now we see all the tools that they're building on our public hosted computers. And so we're going to say, we're going to code those tools, a checkout service, whatever the functionality is. So when you come, you don't even have to have an engineer on your team. Yeah. You can just buy those plugins from us. And so now everybody goes to AWS because they have the largest menu of use cases. So it sounds like you have the largest menu of use cases of any marketing company, marketing data company out there.
Absolutely. I mean, the analogy is very apt. And AWS first started out with EC2, which is just raw compute power, and the analogy for us would just be the raw data. And then over time, they saw how people were using the platform, and they added Elasticache and Redis and RDS, and I think it really helps if you have that customer base who build like proving out some of those use cases for you.
Heck yeah, I love it. Your customers do your use case discovery for you.
Yeah, your product development. So we decided, okay, well, we'll package up these use cases into a marketing suite, and we'll try and reimagine this marketing suite from the ground up. If you look out right now at the landscape, it's kind of a sorry state. You have these marketing automation suites like Marketo that were built 10, 15 years ago, essentially thin wrappers on Oracle databases. They're clunky, and they're not ready for the 21st century. They don't understand data either. And so we were like, okay, well, this is really interesting. Can we as a data company go into the marketing automation space and build a UI, like a really awesome product in that space, something that we'd never really done before. We just built data. And so we started doing that a couple of years ago, and it's really, really worked. It took us a while to build. It's very complicated to like process and host all of that data, but we eventually got there. We released it at the end of last year, and the revenue from this marketing suite was a significant part of Q1 revenue. So it's starting to really work.
Awesome. Congrats. And it also makes you a much more interesting and valuable company, because
Yeah.
data customers can come and go, but a suite, once they're using it, that's a tool that, first of all, they're bringing all their data into it. And so they're going to want to keep using it forever. As long as you keep giving them the features that they want, they're never going to leave you.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is you've got this this kind of high barrier to entry initially with any new tool, right? And any new thing you're selling to someone, especially if they need to make changes to their Salesforce or their website or whatever it is, there's quite a high barrier. So what you want is that barrier to happen just once at the start of the conversation, when you first sell them the suite, and then the ongoing value just gets shipped to them. And whenever you think of a new product feature that you want to sell to your customers, you can develop that and you can just stick it in the suite, and they automatically have access to it, because this suite has all their data on tap. All their events, all their Salesforce records are already synced in, so you can develop much faster.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you, Alex, for that explanation. That was fantastic.